Hey, it's Corey, and today you're gonna learn how to play Hound Dog by Elvis Presley. So before we get into how to play the actual song, one of my viewers made a really, I thought, very good point. All these songs have really cool history attached. So moving forward, I'm gonna try to give you a little bit of information about the songs we're playing, just so you're going about it in a more informed way. Hound Dog was written by Jerry Leiber and Mike Stoller. And in fact, it was actually first recorded by Big Mama Thornton, and her version of the song was actually admitted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 2013 over Elvis Presley's, which we're playing today because of the cultural significance of the song that she brought about, because she originally recorded it. It was like hugely popular at the time, and this song, it's very, very highly covered. There's been over 250 covers of Hound Dog actually, but the most famous one nowadays typically ends up being Elvis Presley. So when I say we're doing Hound Dog by Elvis Presley, we're more trying to emulate his specific cover of it, but it's not his original song. So now that we know a little bit more about Hound Dog, let's talk about the chords you're gonna need to know to play this tune. So this version of Hound Dog is in the key of C, which is fantastic because it means most of the chords we're using are really easy to make. This is a great beginner song, and I have a couple little stylistic things that can make it a little bit more of an intermediate song if you choose, but definitely nothing too difficult. You could probably have this be one of the first songs you ever learn on the uke. The first chord we're gonna be looking at is the C major chord. So you're gonna take your third finger, place it on the first string, 3rd fret. We also use a C7 chord just one time in the whole song, but it adds some really fun color at the end, and the way you make a C7 is taking your first finger, placing it on the first string of the 1st fret. You also need an F major chord. For F major, again, pretty easy to make. Taking your first finger, placing it first on the 2nd string, 1st fret, and then taking your 2nd finger and placing it on the 4th string of the 2nd fret. The last chord we're gonna be using is a G major chord. If you're just starting out with uke, this is probably the most difficult chord of the 4 that we're using today, but it's not that difficult if you just kind of sit down and take some dedicated time to really learn it. You take your first finger, place it on the 2nd fret, 3rd string, take your 2nd finger, place it on the 2nd fret, 1st string, and then your 3rd finger is gonna go right between the 2 on the 2nd string, but 1 fret down on fret 3. And that's your G major. It's gonna help a lot if you place your thumb right behind the 2nd fret to give extra strength, but ideally you should be able to hold on and press hard enough that you can keep your uke up with just this hand. Now that we know those chords, let's take a look at the strumming pattern we're gonna be using throughout. There's 2 versions of the strumming pattern that you could be using. The main, most basic version is essentially the island strum. You're just putting a little bit of different emphasis on it rather than the standard kind of like easy laid back, down, down, up, up, down, up. Instead, it's gonna have a little bit of a faster feel with a down, down, up, down, 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 up, down, up. So again, you can hear the down, down, up. On that up, I'm adding a little bit more weight. I'm adding a little bit more emphasis to kind of give it that feel that Elvis has in his song. A down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up. Now, when I play the play along, I'm gonna be adding a chuck. Typically what I do with this is the first down you play is always gonna remain a down, especially because it normally ends up being on the first down beat, which is a really great way to start. It's very final, it's gonna help you keep the beat. All the other downs in that strumming pattern, aside from the first beat, is going to be replaced with a chuck. If you don't know how to chuck, I do have a tutorial for that, but you can find it in the cards to check it out and learn for yourself. Essentially though, it's a strum that's then muted. Normally this happens in a single stroke. So rather than strum mute, it's a percussive element that we can add to our uke playing to have a little bit more going on. So it turns from a down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, to down, chuck up, down, chuck up, down, chuck up, down, chuck up, chuck up. So now that you know the chords, you know the strumming pattern we're gonna use, let's talk about the actual form of the song. This song just starts. There's no intro section. There's nothing that you're playing ahead of time. It's just gonna start on the singing with, you ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. You're gonna be playing that C for 8 beats, which ends up being for 4 strumming patterns. You're then gonna move on the next Hound Dog to the F chord. You're gonna play that for 2 strumming patterns or 4 beats. or the full bar rather. Then you move to the C again. Again, you're gonna play that for 2 strumming patterns or 4 beats, followed by the G, which you're only gonna be playing for 1 strumming pattern because it's just gonna be for 2 beats. You don't have a split strum or anything because you get to do a full strumming pattern. However, you are breaking it up between the measure. So you have on, you ain't never caught a rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine. And then you go back to the C and you're gonna play that for 2 strumming patterns. This is what that first verse sounds like. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. Well, you ain't never caught a rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine. Now, what you can do at the end of the verses on that C major, you can do essentially what we're trying to emulate here is a tremolo. And that's going to be when you're going to just strum on your uke very quickly. Essentially what you're doing is trying to get a strum on the very tip of your finger where it's going really fast. You might catch a few strings when you're first trying it, but just play around with it and see what it sounds like. This is what that last line will sound like with that little addition. 1, 2, 3, you ain't never caught a rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine. And then you mute really quick, and then you can move into the next verse of when they said you was high class. And essentially you're repeating the same musical information, just changing the lyrics. The transition between verse 1 and verse 2 would sound like this. Well, you ain't never caught a rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine. Well, they say you are high class. Well, that was a lie. This is going to be the same for every single verse that you play. You can always add the little if you'd like, or you could just play it on the strumming pattern and that's fine too. All of this will change though when you get to the last verse, which is just a repeat of verse 1 for the, well, you ain't never caught a rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine is when things are gonna change a little bit. I first want you to listen to what it sounds like before I break it down. So here it is. Again, this is the last verse you're gonna play. Think about how this is different from the first time you played it. 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. You ain't never caught a rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine. And that ends out the song. So what did you notice differently? Well, first of all, hopefully you noticed that when we get to the G on the verse 1, the last time we play it, we're doing a chuck. Now you're still going to hear a little bit, but essentially it's becoming a non-chord tone, which means normally you could either just not play anything there and you let the melody imply the chord that should be played, or you can do a really cool chuck where you hear just a little bit of the chord, but it gets muted really fast. So you get that cool percussive element, but a little bit of the harmony. And we're gonna do that with the F chord too. It just ends up being a really cool, like finite kind of ending, and it feels like something, it's building up to something big. And then of course we go on the F7 and we do the fast playing of the tremolo. You can do this for however you feel like it. This is your big ending of the song, but then ultimately when you're done, you're ending it on a C major, again, doing that chuck mute. Now what's great about this is you don't actually have to do a full chuck to be able to do this fun kind of like little technique. Really in this case, you're just strum muting. And again, you can kind of see what I'm doing there. I'm just strum and putting my hand immediately on the uke. I'm not even chucking. This would be a chuck. This is what the play mute is. So you hear it actually gets sounded, the chord gets sounded, but you're just stopping it from continuing. So this is what the entire last verse is gonna sound like with the ending. Try to play along. 1, 2, here we go. 1. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. Well, you ain't never caught a rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine. And that's the whole tune. With all that, now that we've really broken down the different pieces, and again, these are all just recommendations. You can add whatever you like to really kind of make it your own. Let's try playing it all the way through. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. You ain't never caught a rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine. Well, they said you was high class, that was just a lie. Yeah, they said you was high class, well, that was just a lie. Well, you ain't never caught a rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. Well, you ain't never caught a rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine. All right, so that's the tune. If you have any other specific questions about this song, always feel free to comment down below. I also always keep the song sheet for my tutorials and all my other tutorials and play-alongs on my Patreon, so you're welcome to check that out there, and the link for that is in the description box. But otherwise, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.